Very good, very good. So I would say let's get started with the meeting. I'm going to start with the topic, and then we'll do some Q&A. Somebody wrote me a comment on a video, and sometimes I really like these comments, or they come through an email, but I can't really respond to them or turn them into a video right away. And I want to keep sort of record of these really interesting questions and then use them as a feature topic in a situation like this one. And this one came from Joel. And unfortunately, Joel is not even a patron member, but he sent me this email, and he is a cameraman, and he was curious about my approach to editing because I said something like, I'm going to quote him here. You mentioned you only put what catches your emotion and any other shots didn't matter. I guess what I'm asking is to understand that a little more. As a cinematographer, I only want to give you what I think catches emotions for the story. I want to make sure anything I give the editor does that. I also don't want to waste time and money for shots and story that story doesn't need. In your experience with cinematographers, is there anything I can do to help that? And the answer is yes, there's a lot you can do. And I like the fact that he's really concerned about storytelling. That's already like an advanced thinking cameraman. I broke my answer up into tips for beginners and then some more advanced ones. So I'm going to get to the story point later on. And then I'll ask you as well what you think are some really important points that maybe a cameraman can do better to help you edit. But let's just start at the beginning. I don't know, just think back when you started playing with camera and you started to like get interested into filmmaking and you did your very first couple of shots. You might remember that you were not holding on shots very long. You were kind of like, oh, I saw this, I'm moving on to this, I'm going here, I'm doing that. And immediately in the edit room, I can tell if a cameraman is experienced or not when they're not holding the shot long enough. So tip number one, and that's really the basic and an absolute must, is to wait as long as you can to hold on the shot. So even if you think you got it, give it another 2-3 seconds before you turn the camera off or you move on. I did a lot of editing in reality show, and sometimes there were cameramen where I could tell they've never been in an edit room or they've never seen their shots being executed or had that translation. And so they were just going to some people, they were finding their shots as a close-up, and the moment they had it, they moved on to the next one. And so really force yourself at the beginning to hold the shot. I'm going to read some comments here. Okay, Todd is freelance again. I hope you enjoy that. Cut to the Point is from Poland. That's awesome. 8 p.m. here. Good. Hates Michael Bay editing. Yeah, absolutely. Michael Bay is obviously known for his chaos cinema, where shots don't really make sense. They just cut. And it works to a certain degree, but it's very confusing in terms of you never really know where you are in terms of the layout of a scene. So Ross likes how Walter Murch talks about being a tour guide in his book, that you tell part of the history and doesn't try and tell everything all at once. Okay, that's good. It's good. Herzog talks about holding the shot as well. Yeah, what does he say? He says just hold it, like keep it longer. Very cool. So that's tip number one. We're starting off easy. The second one for the beginners is grab B-roll. Especially in the reality world, they are in the moment, they're shooting the scene, and then they have to move on. So make sure that in between, when you're waiting for the next take or things are slowing down, that you use that time to get insert shots, get shots of hands, get close-ups of people just listening. All that stuff is usable in the edit. And especially when you're in documentary or a reality, that really is the number one tool for you to manipulate the story, because you really, in documentary, you have maybe more noble causes than in reality, but you really want to be able to tell the story that really dramatically engages the audience. And sometimes your characters won't reveal what they really mean. They'll present a certain side of the story, and then you as the editor have to sort of be a little bit of taking responsibility and making sure that really what people are saying is what the audience is understanding. And so it helps to be able to hold on shots, to have a close-up of a person listening that maybe out of context makes no sense, but when you cut it the right way, it really informs that maybe the person that's talking is lying, or it's not really about what they're saying, it's about something else. I just in a recent video I released yesterday, the reaction shot often is the one that infers emotion. So it's tip number 2, grab your B-roll, your inserts. Let's look in the chat room, see if we have some comments. That sounds good. It's interesting how there's almost a disconnect between the eye and what gets filmed. Yeah. So Herzog says that his cameraman cannot turn off the camera even if the hero ended to talk, or so it seems. I think that's a very good rule, because oftentimes the stuff when people are not aware that they're being filmed is obviously less self-conscious and more genuine. So it's good to take advantage of that. Todd says, I like how you said that it's good to hold a shot even after out. Yeah, after cut is called. Sorry, my reading is like, I need new glasses. Because you might catch an expression from an actor that you can, yeah, I just said that. Cool, awesome talk. All right, so far we had 2 tips. I see a couple of people are joining us now. So we had hold the shot as long as you can and grab B-roll whenever you have the opportunity, which is during takes, when you take a break, or before you break down and the scene is done, grab additional B-roll. It's so helpful. Number 3, respect the slate. So if you are on a film set that is being slated, make sure that you as the cameraman insist that there is a slate whenever possible at the beginning of the take. Oftentimes, I have to deal with a cameraman who disregards this. He just wants to go. He's in the moment. He wants to shoot. He doesn't want to be bothered by sort of the set etiquette. He just wants to go. And then at some point, they just drop the slate. And it just creates so much more work in post-production. It's disrespectful to the sound department on set, and it's disrespectful to the post people, because now they have additional unnecessary work where they sometimes have to like listen for minutes to find out a sync point in a scene. And it's especially hard if you don't have sound fed to the camera on set so that you have some reference sound that's being recorded at the same time. Sometimes you just have a picture without sound, and if you don't have a slate with a visual cue and a marker, you can sync the sound easily. So super important, be respectful as a cameraman, insist that slate is being used, be respectful to the sound person. Oftentimes there's a rivalry between the two. Like the sound guy is trying to figure out how he's going to get his boom into the shot, and he's going to play around with that. And the cameraman will not give him the time, or will not rehearse the shot, or let him know what the frame is, so that the boom operator can really make sure that he gets the best possible sound in that situation. And being respectful to the sound department. Like, I hate it when a cameraman, and I can hear this in the dailies, it's just like making snarky remarks or disregarding the comments of the sound person. And for me as an editor, sound is my biggest asset. It's more important almost than the visual, because if I have bad sound, we have a problem. I can't really tell the story right away in a natural way. I have to find other ways, because you can get around a bad shot. You can't really get around bad audio. So that's tip number 3 and 4. Respect the slate, and 3. Let's look at the chat room and see if anybody has any comments regarding those tips. That comment was for the first tip. Todd, slate is a must, even when recording MOS. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Todd, you work in special effects, so sometimes you get just shots that are meant to be plates. And do you work with sound as well when you work on these shots? So then the nostalgic Norden says Swedish director Bo, fuck me, Witterberg stopped using slates. Instead, he held the slate himself and just started filming, and then clapped when when the take was over. Right, do it. Clap. Do it that way. If I at least have that visual cue and the sound, that's all I need. I mean, it's great to know what the scene number is and all that stuff. That's helpful as well. But if I don't have this, it adds so much time in post. Slate is a lifesaver. Oh, hey, Bern from Norway. How are you? Sorry, I gotta get close to the camera. It's like I need to get new glasses. It's that age. Awesome channel, content. Okay, great. Well, welcome that you're here. Glad you're here. So Todd says, not when doing visual effects, don't need sound, but recently I became a DP for a friend for his feature film, and it's so important. What was the sound of an F-bomb? Oh, nice. Yeah, sorry. This is a rated channel, so I might be cussing. All right, so those were my 4 tips for beginners. I'm going to recap. Hold the shot, grab B-roll whenever you can, respect the slate, respect the sound man. I'm going to move on to the advanced tips. This one is a big one. Listen to the actors. Many times I can tell in the edit if the camera guy is not listening during the take because they're fidgeting with the shot, they're readjusting, or they're zooming out at the wrong moment, and they're kind of screwing up the moment by making us suddenly think about the camera. So don't look as shots. Look at them as building blocks of story and listen to that story and try to capture it in the best way possible. So, and sometimes you're stuck in a shot and you don't have the perfect angle for that moment, but it's much better to capture the moment than to make it about the camera at the moment. So listen to the actors. And that leads me straight to number 2 for the advanced editing tips, and that is catch the moment even if imperfectly. And I actually heard this first time when I did the video with Chris Torini for the Epic Editing Challenge, where he brought that up as an editing tip and for camera as well, is to catch the moment even if imperfectly. And what that means is be super aware of what's going on and figure out what the moments are that are happening and make sure you get them on camera. And this sort of goes back to Joel's initial question. He said, oh, I want to give you what serves the story, so I don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to just give you what you want. Well, the thing is, we don't really know what it is until we're in the edit and we're sort of finding the story. Even though the script is one interpretation of the story and it's the blueprint, there's certain moments that happen in the moment on set that when captured, you can use in the edit. And that might pull the story into a completely different direction. And for that, it's not so important as a cameraman that you're trying to like figure out what the story is, but that you just pay attention, watch, listen, and capture each moment in the best way that you can, which is hold the shot and make sure you got it. And if you feel like you can help that moment by zooming in slowly or whatever your language is, cinematography, when you like need to reset the camera, find a different angle and repeat the moment, that's great. That's awesome. But the basic is you have to catch the moment even if imperfectly. So let's take another look in the chat room. I'm going to get close to the camera again. Let's see what everybody else says. Nothing. Let me know what you think about this. I'm going to move on to the next tip, and this is shoot coverage. Coverage is basically all the steps that you are creating for a scene. So you could start off with the master, you get your close-ups, you get your medium shots, you get some interesting profile shots, some dolly push-ins that creates specific emphasis on moments. All that is coverage. And you should get as much coverage as you can afford in terms of time and money. I remember early in my career as a film student at the American Film Institute, the DPs were always pushing for the oneer. They always wanted to have that perfect crane shot or jib shot that completely covers the scene, starting from a master and pushing into the close-up right at the moment when the most important emotion is being conveyed. And it would take 4 hours, it would take 8 hours to set up the shot. They would lose daylight, they would have to relight and whatever, and they would barely get the shot. And then they had to move on. And then you're in the editing room and you're like, this play doesn't play really right in terms of the pacing overall. We need to cut this short. How am I going to just get to what's important? So now I don't have any building blocks as an editor. So as much as I like a really cool shot, I really, really like coverage. To shoot a scene, even if you feel like you've done it the way that the director designed the shot, together with the DP, allow time to shoot coverage and get additional close-ups, medium shots, profile, over the shoulder, all these standard shots, so that in the editing you can take control of a scene. You can shape the performances. You can rewrite the script. Do all these things that are often necessary once you realize, oh, pacing-wise, we're losing the audience here. So super important. So going back to Joe, who says, well, I don't want to waste anybody's time. You're not wasting anybody's time by shooting more, by doing coverage, by giving me options. I'd rather have too many options than too little. Let me know what you think about that one. I think that's a good one. And I'm going to read some comments. Todd says, coverage is so important in that it helps set the mood. Right, coverage gives you control of the pacing, the rhythm, and with that, the mood. Peter, hey Peter, how are you? Willie says, come to the set prepared with all shot storyboards that will lead to other coverage shots. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it's good to be prepared. It's great to be prepared. I had a cameraman who doesn't like to do storyboards or doesn't have a pre-production meeting and think about the scene. He just likes to come on the moment and just feel it and just see what the actors are doing and then react to it. That works to a certain degree, but I think it's even better if you had prior discussions with the director and you really explore what is the story that you're telling, and maybe do storyboards, even if that's not something you're really keen on. But that preparation is going to help you when you're in the moment to have the right intuitive ideas. So for me personally as well, if I do some directing every once in a while, I prepare a lot. I get a storyboard artist, I design all the shots, and I try to get them done in the day, but I'm not afraid to throw them out on the day if I have another idea. At least I know what I want, what I originally wanted, and I see an opportunity to make it better. So I'm starting off in a much better position than I'm just going on a set and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna feel it. I'm gonna try and figure it out. And for the edit, that's, again, it's great if somebody has a plan. It's great if things happen by coincidence and there's something really interesting happening in a specific take that I can build my story around. Doing coverage, being prepared is awesome. All right, let's move on to the last one. I might have already said it, but I think it's the most important tip. And that is, as a cameraman, don't think shots, think story. So when you read the script, think about the characters, what's their motivation, what's their subtext, what are they saying and what are they meaning, what do you want the audience to feel? And let that all guide how you're going to visually design these shots. I can tell when a cameraman is on set and he's trying to get a really great shot for his reel. and it's like spends a lot of time to get great shots, but as a building block for the edit doesn't help. And if you really, as a cameraman, want to really understand and know how you can help editors do their job better, just edit. Like, take a couple of the shots that you did, even if you worked on a film, ask them to give you the dailies and start cutting scenes yourself. And that's really when you start to understand how story comes together. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a great editor, but the fact that you have to put a master and a close-up together and see how the transition works makes you understand, oh, maybe instead of shooting everybody static, they're already in their position, maybe every person should come into the frame like this at the beginning of the take. That gives the editor the opportunity to cut on the action. It was kind of a very lame demonstration of this, but having just everybody already in place often is very hard to cut, because you like these moments, these dynamic moments where people come into a shot or when the camera finds the people. It really makes for a better flow of story. So that's what I have. Are there any tips that you have how cameramen, women can help to shoot for the edit? Let's take a look at the chat room. Let's see, we have 14 people in the room. Is everybody hearing me? The reception is great. It's like, picture is awesome. Okay, take my glasses off again. Give us advice where to educate. Okay, on camera movements, operator language. That's a good one. I mean, there are some YouTube channels that go into that. Probably Wolf Crow is somebody that I would recommend. I'm going to put that in the chat room. He's really, in terms of the film lingo and technical aspects of camera work, I think he's up there. He's one of the tops. So there are a lot of filmmakers like Peter McKinnon and Simon Cade and so on that are good for stuff. But for real filmmaking, I think somebody like Wolf Pro is really, he knows what he's talking about. Okay. I think it's a must to work with the director for shooting, since they're responsible for telling the story. Yeah, absolutely. It's great if the cameraman and the director have lots of time in pre-production where they talk story and shots, because the more they are on the same page before they get on set, the better it will be for them to work, because they're really doing different things at the same time. And if they can't find the time to talk to each other, or there's tension and that line of communication is broken down, it's good to have these initial conversations so that at least the DP has an understanding of the director's vision, at least from pre-production, what the original intent is. Do you have any other YouTube channels you might have just discovered that you suggest to get some more information and or technique? I think they're called Cook's Optics. It's a lens company, but they are really strong in creating content. They have great interviews with DPs and editors on their site. It's a little hard to watch because it's just a straight person talking, just like this. But the insights that you get from these real pros, like top level craftsmen, is great. So Cook Optics, check that one out. Anyone else that comes to mind? I have to think about it and come back to you on the next post meeting. I'll have a list of my favorite YouTube channels. As far as I understand, Quentin Tarantino starts the day rehearsing and blocking and discovers how the scene wants to be shot on that day. This is coming from Nostalgia Norden. That's great. I mean, Quentin Tarantino can do whatever he wants to. He's done it enough, and he figured it out on his first film. I'm pretty sure he had a lot of preparation on that one and how he's going to do it. But it's I think certain artists, when they reach that level where it's just instinct, and even taking the time to think about it is not really helpful to them, because being in the moment, just making decisions and not giving a fuck about what that decision is, just going with it. And then at the end, you're like, yeah, this worked out. And it worked out so much better than if I could have ever pre-planned it. It's great. Like once you reach a certain level, you can do that. And I'm not saying I'm at that level, but when I'm editing these YouTube videos, I'm just trying to cut them as fast as possible. So I'm not spending 2 hours reworking something and trying to figure out other things. I'm like, this is an idea I have. Just like in that video that came out yesterday with, you can see it in the BTS video where you can watch me edit. Steve Halfish is giving some advice to young filmmakers, and I need to visualize that. So I'm like, okay, who's the biggest advice giver in the universe? It's Yoda. So then I grab a scene and I start remembering, and just in the moment, I'm putting these scenes in there, and I'm not questioning it at that point. I'm like, okay, this is what we're going with. I mean, after the fact, maybe a day later, I sleep over it, I might tweak it, or I might change my mind on something, but 80% of the time, whatever that first idea is the way that I'm cutting it. And I'm sure Quentin Tarantino, it's just instinct at that point. Everybody can hear me? Great. Okay, Todd knows Wolf Crow. Well, Todd, and also cut to the point, let me know if you have other YouTubers that maybe I should be checking out that I'm not familiar with, that are sort of on that real filmmaking level. Not saying that Peter McKinnon is not a real filmmaker, but he's a YouTuber. Getting back to the idea of how an editor is a tour guide, I love the idea of how the director and the DP create the history of what is shot, and the editor crafts how to tell it to the public. Okay, I have to think about that. Getting a tour guide. I don't know if I really see it that way as the editor. I see whatever the script is, I see whatever the shots are as an opportunity for me to tell the story. So I'm not trying to recount an historic moment that happened. It's happening to me right now as I'm seeing it. It's very present, and even to the point where I'm not even looking at the script anymore. I'm just looking at shots and performances. And I kind of know what the director is going for. We had that initial talk. I understand where we're trying to get, and I might already have cut other scenes, so I understand the context, but I'm really just experiencing the moment for the first time, and I'm really the first audience of that moment. And as an ambassador of the audience, I'm trying to make it work emotionally. I'm not disagreeing with, who said it? Was it Herzog? I'm thinking a lot about Herzog recently, so one more from him. I've seen his masterclass. I did too. It's good. And he talks about entering the frame and demonstrates how you can do it. That's good. Entering the frame or having the camera settle in, that's two different ways of creating dynamic cut points, is really, really helpful. I saw another video by Nerdwriter, how David Fincher frames, where he basically locks the camera to the motion of the actors. So the slightest movement of the actor has an immediate response by the camera. And it creates that connection and intimacy between the actor and the audience. And I've heard from many editors that worked on David Fincher shows, especially Mindhunters, that they recreate this in the edit. So every shot is being stabilized, every dolly glitch, everything will be taken out. They just want to have this exact movement between the actor and the camera. It's not being used all the time, but when it's used, it's very effective. So Herzog used it in Bad Lieutenant, really good tip, although it's more about the director than the cinematographer. Cool. Willie says, quick question. I almost have like a 2 seconds rule for a reaction shot to make a cut. If it's less than that, it's hard for the audience to register the emotion. That helps me cut. What's your take? I I don't have a 2-second rule. I just feel it. Like I let the reaction shot sit in the edit. I often cut it long, so I can figure out, okay, when is the blink happening? Is there a blink? So the concept of when an actor blinks, he's changing his thought or he finished a thought. I'm sort of paying attention to that, not consciously, subconsciously. And then I decide, okay, at what moment do I feel like the action is complete? Or at what moment do I need to return to the person on camera speaking and decide in real time where that cut point is? I'm not as rigid as Walter Murch, where he like hits the spot, goes back, hits the spot again. I think that doesn't really work, because what you're doing is you're training your brain to hit the same spot, and you're practicing for that. But to figure out, okay, I think it's in this area. I'm gonna just say it's over here. So it could be 2 seconds, could be longer. I mean, I love reaction shots that are long if they hold, if you can hold it. I think we know what you mean by Peter McKinnon. Yeah, he's good though. I mean, he's got it figured out. Yeah, I've seen the one about Fincher as well. So good. Yeah, that's the Nerdwriter video. Highly recommend. It's a great one. Ross says, love that Fincher film, especially when he did the breakdown between Mills and Somerset and the chief during their discussion. Are you talking about the video that came out yesterday? Yeah, that is such a fascinating masterclass, that scene, how that is cut, and how interesting dialogue can be when you know what you're doing. And it's just riveting to see how they're going to get that person to just break. So it was super helpful, and that's what I love about YouTube. Is now I get opportunities to reflect on certain films and just look at them and see what are they actually doing, how is their manipulation working, and how effective that is. And then I can turn around and do that on the next one. And then I have that as a tool for myself. Good. I think there's a link for the Fincher video. What in the chat if you have a link. So this was what I have. We are at 11:35, so that's actually really good. I think that's a good format to have a featured topic. Let me know if you agree. I have some other housekeeping, and then we're going to take some questions from you just in general. Anything you want to know about the channel, video ideas that you might have, problems you might have, a specific project. This really is meant to be the post meeting where we get to know each other. Am I constantly looking at the or the cameras, or do you see the difference? Anyway, let me know if you have any questions while you're typing it into the chat room. I'm going to make a few announcements. Coming up next, I hope I'm going to get it done in the next 2 weeks, is another big video from the What It Takes series. It's the series where I go to somebody else's editing bay and let him show me or her how they're working in the edit and really demonstrate. And we have Misho, that's his name, Mohamed El Menestli. He's the Emmy-winning documentary editor on The Square, about the revolution in Egypt a few years back, and it's available for free on Netflix, so you should check it out. It was nominated for an Oscar. And so we talk about that film, but he didn't have it on his system, so he went through his current project that he's cutting now. He's now living in LA. After he won the Emmy, he just like, I got to stay here. I love this place. And he is really, really anal about organization. So I've not seen an editor that is more organized when it comes to integrating Trello with footage, with working with his assistant and Google Doc, and figuring out how every little task is being kept track of, and maximizing the potential of a story by being super organized. And so I'm going to try in the next 2 weeks to really do a video about that, and that'll be awesome. And there'll be extra content in that regard for Patreon members. I did a full Q&A session with him. I asked you a couple of months ago, did you have any questions for him regarding documentary? And he answered all of them. So that'll be on there. Then something new coming, and it's going to launch tomorrow, is a podcast, and it's the soft launch, which means I started recording a couple of episodes with friend Tyler Danner, who you might have seen in one of the videos. And he really pushed me and said, we got to do a podcast. We got to do a podcast. Podcast is the thing. I was like, I don't want to do a podcast. It's like, I don't have enough time. And he's like, I'll take care of everything. You just give me a half hour and we'll do a podcast once a week. So what we're doing is we're looking at one scene, and that scene has to be available on YouTube, so people can actually, if they are on a computer, they can watch the scene with us. And we're doing a full editing analysis of that scene. So the podcast that we first did was Spider-Man, the original with Tobey Maguire. It's one of the early fight scenes in the school hallway. And Sam Raimi directed the film, and I was actually really surprised how much cinematic filmmaking we could get out of that scene, and how that was edited. So we'll talk about that. It's not perfect yet, in the sense we're talking about things that if you don't see the scene the same moment, it's a little rough, but we learned. And so the next one we did with 12 Years a Slave, it's that opening scene where Michael Fassbender is whipping Lupita. And there's something that I noticed that I'm pretty sure nobody's noticed in that oneer. Take a look at that scene and see if you know what it is. But there's some clever editing going on. And we'll talk about that in number 2, and we're doing a much better job describing it so you don't actually have to see the scene. So a podcast launching tomorrow. We'll have another post meeting like this next month. I really think this is one of the key elements of being on Patreon and growing this community, is the ability to talk to each other. So I'm going to try I talked to Chris about this, like what's the best streaming app and what can I do? And he recommended something I'm going to try and install, and can also then hook up my new camera that I bought, which is this guy. It's the Sony RX100 Mark V. I didn't get the 6 because the 5 is better. Has a better lens, and see if I can hook that up. And perfectly, I mean, the thing that I really want is for you guys to come on. And if I have the ability to switch so that you can be on camera and talk, and I can switch back and forth and make it much more of a dialogue, that'd be great. I'm gonna explore Google Hangout. I think there's a limit, but I'm gonna see what we can do about that. Might not happen in the next month, but eventually that's where we're gonna get to. All right. Time to take some questions. I should collab with Nerdwriter. It would be gold. I would love to. Actually, he messaged me after I did the Tommy Wiseau video where I made fun of the Nerdwriter. He's like, you got me. It's awesome. I got back to him, and I was trying to build a relationship, but I don't think he's at that level. He's probably getting so many requests that even though we're now following each other, it's going to be hard to get him to do a collab. But I'd love to do one. Maybe give a couple of shout outs to him, let him know. Thanks, man. When the action is complete, a great tip. How do you, this is coming from High Tech Productions. How do you decide the pacing is good after watching it over and over and over? It comes with editing. So the more you edit, the more you get a sense of the flow of a story. So you're always going to give it your best shot. You're going to this is what I think the audience is going to feel at that moment. And then you cut it. And then what really helps me is, once I'm done with a film, to actually go into a theater with an audience and just sit there. Don't sit with a cast and crew if it's one of those screenings. Sit where the audience is and just pick up their body language. And I don't even have to look at anybody. I can just sit there and I can feel when they're shifting, when they're uncomfortable, maybe wanting to look at their phone, or when they are just grabbed. Their attention is there. And so I'll do a couple of screenings like this, and if I have the opportunity to go back and open up the film, I'll make adjustments, like with the alt-right that we did. Premiered at South by Southwest, I made sure that I see all 3 screenings. The director was gone after the premiere and so on. They had to move on. there was another premiere in Denmark. But I stayed and I watched all of them. And then I had 70 pacing notes afterwards. And I just emailed the director and said, okay, this is what I feel. This is, I think, where we can make the film better. And we probably incorporated 70% of those notes. And the film is as the best it's been, actually not at South by Southwest, but the version that came out now, because we could really take advantage of creating the dynamic range, the pacing with the audience. So you give it your best shot and then put it out there. And if you get a couple of friends that haven't seen the film in a room, just sit there and just take in their energy. And that will inform a lot of new ideas that you can never think of by doing that. Okay, so that's that question. Let me see what else we got. Went back and we watched. That sounds good. Thanks. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for doing that. Use Zoom. It's much better. What do you mean use Zoom? Just in general? Sven, I co-edited two shorts when I was working in a production house. Now I'm on my own. I would like to edit an interesting short. Any place opportunities you recommend? You're in Poland, right? So I think remote editing is basically already happening. So it doesn't really matter as much where you are. So I would try and reach out to filmmakers online and see if you can find somebody to trust you to maybe just cut a scene for them and see if that communication works remotely. And then that opens up the opportunity to find other shorts in other countries. There are some really cool shorts happening in England. I get a lot of like people sending me scripts, and if I feel like it's an interesting thing, I'll take a look at it. And they're willing to do remote editing just because it's hard to find the right editor. So just put yourself out there. It's hard to network through a message board or stuff like that. If you can locally go to whatever meetups there are, that's good. But I mean, Frugal Filmmaker, I think, is a pretty good Facebook community. I would become a member of that if you're not already, and just see if you can find ways to talk to people. Todd, how do you decide when? It's great that you put my name there with red. It's like immediately I want to just answer this question. How do you decide when to use a J or L cut? I already left a comment on that as well. I was going to respond to that. How do you time it? Well, there's no hard rule, but a J or L cut in general represents a head turn. So if somebody's talking over there and I can already hear them, I'm turning my head and then I'm looking at them. That's represented by a J cut, in the sense that when you cut, you have the visual of the first shot and you hear already what's the other person is talking to, and you give sort of that moment it takes to turn your head when that would be a real life situation. So it can be, I don't know, it can be 6 frames, it can be 15 frames. And sometimes I stay longer on the audio. For example, in the video from yesterday, we're still in 12 Years a Slave, and she's being like cut off the tree and she falls down, Lupita, and I'm already hearing the Oscar announcement that she won an Oscar for that performance. And I stay on that all the way until the applause comes up, because the reason why she won the Oscar, I think, is partially because of that scene. And so visually, I really wanted to make that point that maybe people don't understand it intellectually, but emotionally, that her performance at that moment contributed to the fact that she was awarded this really important award for many reasons. Because of the story, because of her, because of where she comes from, and for us editors, because she really thanked Joe Walker, the invisible performer in the edit bay, that helped make that performance what it is. So she sort of gave a nod to us. So I know what I did as an actor, And I know what the power is in the editing room. I understand it because I've seen it. I know, experienced one thing on set, and seeing the film made it like something bigger, is what I'm getting from that nod. So that afforded a J cut that is much longer than usual, because it's worth it. And so it really depends on the story that you're telling. Like, is it a head turn, or is it an emotional point you're making? There you go. Did it work? I'm going to next year. Are you going to South by Southwest next year? Cool. I don't see myself going again. I mean, unless I have a film, but I don't think I'm starting a new film now. I don't think it'll be ready then. And it's actually an international film. So hopefully it'll go to Berlin, is what I'm hoping. It would be good to have an in-person This Guy Edits meeting. Yeah, we should do a meetup at some point. Once this gets bigger, hopefully it will get bigger. It'd be good to have meetups whenever I'm at a film festival or a convention or NAB or whatever these events are, that it's worthwhile attending if you can make it work, if you're close to it. Or so. But Todd, you were at NAB, and I think you got a lot out of it. I know that was probably the best NAB I've experienced. So many things, like the Super Meet that we both went to. I thought it was really cool having Dylan Tichenor, that's his name, right? He's the editor for Anderson, P.T. Anderson. He spoke there. I thought it was really insightful. Oh, Zoom is a product for video conference. Thank you. I'm glad I asked. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Make sure that works. I don't want to pay. I don't want to use a software that wants me to immediately pay like 10% of my income. But if it's something free and it's usable, I'm all game. Yes, actually. So yes, actually, I edit for Australian company, but it's hard to enter the short film world. It's always hard to switch genres in general. So when I started editing, I first did documentary. I was lucky. I did the James Cameron documentary, but then I abandoned that field and did my own film. And then I sort of stumbled into reality. It was just at the beginning, like American Idol season. And suddenly, within a couple of years, I became a go-to editor in that genre. And I just, the phone would be ringing, but it was always another reality show. And I went for it because it was money. It was really good money. Editors in reality get paid more than in any other TV genre. And there's a good reason why, because they need to be storytellers. But at some point, I'm like, you know what? This is really not what I want to be doing. So I had to switch genres, and I had to get back into it. And I was lucky that I could really link up with Mark Webber to do his second feature, The End of Love. And he didn't even consider me. And I said on the phone, I'm like, let's just meet tonight. Let's just talk. I want to have a conversation. And I gave him some points in the script where I felt like this is really something important that should be brought out. And he's like, okay, it can't hurt. So then we met. We spent probably like 2 hours that evening drinking and talking. And he hired me on the spot. And that gave me the opportunity to get back into the genre. Luckily, that film went to Sundance. And just get a couple of credits there. And really what's going to happen is that somebody is going to give you the opportunity to edit for them when they're in a bind. And I think he kind of was in a bind that the editor that he really wanted was not available, which was Ray Rabinovich. He's the editor for Requiem for a Dream. Awesome editor. Jim Jarmusch works with him as well. But he just wasn't available. So he had to look somewhere else, and he couldn't get somebody from that caliber. So I snuck in there. She thanked her editor. Yes, Lupita did. Can you explain how to tell a well-edited film from a well-directed film? Probably not. It's very hard to tell whether a film is edited well, even for me, because I'm not sitting there when I'm watching a film thinking about the edits. The better the film is, the less you're thinking about how it's done. And so I can just assume that it's edited well when it's working, because we don't know what decisions led to this end product, what else they had, how much better it could be. So directing, I think you can tell in the sense that, okay, there's craftsmanship. You can tell if somebody really knows how to cinematically tell a story. And so you can have appreciation for that. But ultimately, that's just sort of a side appreciation. What you really appreciate is when you engage with the story. It comes with writing, that comes with the actors, that comes with directing. It's really the writing and the acting that really makes that happen. So I can't really answer how to tell when a film is edited well. I'm going to take just a few more questions. We're approaching 12 o'clock. Yes, NAB was a great experience for the editing events. Yeah, LumaForge has a great series there where they take it off the showroom floor and they have speakers come on. Steve Halfish was there, and it's available on YouTube. So this whole presentation that he gave, best advice I got from the top editors, is really inspired by that talk he gave. I basically afterwards approached him and said, look, let's turn that into a video essay. And so there's some real cool talks on the site, thanks to LumaForge. Free for 40 minutes, otherwise you have to pay. Okay, that's Zoom. I'll look into it. Maybe it's going to be tough to be stuck at 40 minutes. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. And let's do it again. 13 people. That's cool. That's more than I was expecting. I hope it's going to grow. I hope at some point we're going to have 500 people in the chat room, and then we're going to figure something out. Technically, maybe I'll have a moderator with me, or maybe one of you can become a moderator, and then you can like make sure that I don't miss anything. So thank you so much for watching. Check out the BTS video that came out yesterday night, how I cut the scene from the Steve Halfish video. I think it's really cool because I talk a little bit about non-editing related things. And watch for the podcast. And thanks so much for being a patron. It does really mean a lot. It's still small, but I think it is a big deal to be part of this channel, because I don't believe that YouTube, the goal is not to be on YouTube and be Peter McKinnon. That comes with so much trouble, and you have to make so many, like in terms of the content that you're making, you can't really do the type of stuff that I want to do. And you're also you're at the mercy of sponsors more. I don't want to be I like sponsors. I think it's good because I don't think YouTube AdSense money is ever going to make sense as a business for a creator in the less than 1 million subscriber range. But the most important part is if you have patrons fully covering this experience and making it as a business viable, then you don't need to listen to anybody but the patrons. And you can do whatever you want. And if for some reason YouTube is ever going to go away, then it doesn't really matter at that point. And at some point, something will happen to YouTube that's not going to be good. And I like this community. I like being able to have this relationship. It's so helpful for myself, for my own work. And I get so many ideas. I learn so many things. And if you have that same experience, maybe not as much, you should have it as much as I do. I get more out of it than you do, maybe, is what I'm saying. But I do appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you in a month. Have a good one. Bye.